Hi!
Hi.
I love being here with you.
Can we do this every day?
Please give me 1 second. Wait.
Sure. Is the lighting better, you guys, than what it was before? Can somebody let me know? I think it's
Yeah,
better.
me too. I'm trying to fix the lighting.
Technical stuff, you guys. You want to make it
Technical
perfect.
stuff. Good.
Happy to see you. How are you holding up with everything going
I'm
on?
good. I mean, the first 2 days, and you asked me, were very nice to write me a message. How was I doing? The first 2 days and that I decided to self quarantine, it was really, really hard. And I couldn't connect with my husband, with my kids, with myself. I was in the future creating stories of what was going to happen. So it was really difficult until I literally asked myself to pause and ask myself, what am I needing right now? And what I was needing was a conversation with my husband to divide roles and set expectations and talk about our needs and how we were going to be able to honor each other's needs in this new situation that we were living. So it was really, really good for us to have that conversation. And that's when my whole paralyzed state was able to go down and I was able to take more action. So right now I'm doing good, thank God. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Yesterday was definitely, I started to feel it. I saw some of my mentors and teachers and just witnessing. I was watching a video Esther Perel put out and just seeing all of our wise elders like in an emotional state, like just got me, I was like, they're feeling it. It just cracked my heart open. It's waves with the grief. As you know, it's like
It's waves.
you think you're fine, everything's okay, and then all of a sudden you have a moment of just like, oh my God, what's happening? And then, like you said, it's being able to bring ourselves back into the present, which, I mean, for me, it's always focusing on my breath, but also letting myself feel sad. It's normal, it's healthy, it's cleansing. And so I feel better today. I wasn't sure. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be very emotional on the call, but I actually feel much more calm today.
I'm really glad. And I love what you said, and that's key, the allowing ourselves to feel. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves and for our families, to literally allow ourselves and allow others to also process their feelings in their own unique ways. I think that's also very important.
And we're not used to it because we're used to holding space for each other, right? But now it's like this collective grief. Like, wait, let's just all hold each other and cry together, right? And that's healing in itself too.
Or not cry. I mean, 100%
Yes.
cry, and that would be my way. And I think that's why we get so along, because I feel like we manage emotions very similarly.
Yes, I think so.
But there's a lot of people that it's very hard for them to cry, or it's really hard for them to process it, and maybe their way of processing their emotions is very different and we want them to process it just like we are processing it, and sometimes that gets in the way of the relationship. So definitely, yeah, it's really important to reach a state of acceptance of how others are dealing with the situation, so we be able to help ourselves but also help the other person at the same time, or later when you're able to like get in contact with yourself.
I mean, how many
Yeah.
couples right now, like there's one person that is more in the emotional anxiety, kind of feeling the present, and then one person is a little bit more logical and more in the processing things in the brain. And it's like you said, it's really tempting to want to, my partner is much more logical and I'm much more, but it's been enough years that I don't take it personally, but we've learned to use the strengths. And of course, there's times where it meets and we have our little explosions and we have to work through that. But it's helpful to just not take the differences personally and to accept, like you said, accept each other, not judge each other for them.
Yeah, I agree. It's difficult. Like I all of this situation, it's very new
I
for
love
all of
that
us.
Brian's watching and he just said,
Hi,
yes, very
Brian.
true.
Come in. Have a conversation with us.
Right there.
Is Silvy acting crazy?
Tell us the truth about what goes on behind the scenes. That's really fun. Well, we're going to have a beautiful conversation about parenting today. You know, normally I've been saying I'm usually much more structured, but I don't know if it's because I don't have as much energy or I'm just like, you know, we've all kind of taken off masks and are just being able to be more of our authentic, unfiltered selves. Of course, you know, I still have a little bit of structure. Who am I kidding? I still have a few touch points. Hi, Ray. Do you want to come say hi? Yeah, he wants to come say hi.
Hi, Brian.
So,
how are you?
This is my brilliant logical man that helps me regulate my wide range of feelings.
I love it.
We need each other. We bring so much gifts to each other.
I'm so glad. That's so important. I swear, Silvy.
I need the wild and the expressive, even though
makes it more fun.
Anyway, that was fun. I just wanted to say hi. What's up, man? Hi.
We have Patty with our dog.
That's right.
A golden retriever.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Have fun. Bye.
I didn't know you had a golden retriever.
We do. Do you have one?
No, I would love one. So.
Well, we're going to be talking about parenting. We're focusing back now. You got a glimpse of the real world coming back. Parenting, you know, right now there's parents that are teachers, parents that are completely, their lives have shifted to, you know, both work at home and teach their kids online stuff that's been normally in a classroom setting, single parents, parents that are struggling and having to raise a child in a small room. You know, what are some of the other kinds of parenting dynamics you've been seeing, Stephanie, in your work?
Everything, single parents, parents that have just been laid off and are dealing with a lot of financial difficulties. So, you know, it's really hard when you get, I don't know if you got it, I got like 1 million of them, and I actually got excited first, and the whole routine, and let's start teaching at home, and now the parents are the teachers, and like this whole new way of parenting in quarantine, that you have like so many duties as a parent, but then again, you're in survival mode, trying to see how are we going to figure out how to get ends meet and all of this stuff going on at the same time, and it's really hard, you know. And if you add to all of this, which is usually what happens, shame, which is I'm not doing good enough as a parent, I couldn't teach my children today's lesson, I couldn't send the pictures, my teachers are asking me pictures of proof that I'm doing the activities, so I couldn't take the picture because obviously I was too focused on trying to control the two kids and have them pay attention, and all of this going on, it can be too much. And again, if you add the self-judgment, then where do you go with all of this, you know? And not just that, like when you're already in a fear state, in an ego state, and you add self-judgment, and then your child has a tantrum, or they're being a little bit more challenging than normal, it's very easy that we then, you know, deflect everything that we're feeling onto them, and then we make them feel bad for having a normal child reaction. And then it becomes a power struggle, and it's really hard. Like I have seen parents that are having a really hard time at this time, and they don't know what to do, and they want to meet society's and school's expectations to be this perfect mother, but obviously it's impossible. And I think we have to understand, because people don't talk about this, as we know. When we talk about it a lot, people don't like to be vulnerable, people want to appear perfect. And if you go on social media, you're gonna see the typical video of the parent with their children sitting, doing their homework, because that's what they're gonna post. They're not gonna post the bad parts of the exercise. and it can be very hard. It can be very hard to deal with it. So I think number one is to understand and accept that we're in a very special and difficult situation, and that it's normal if you're having a hard time. What do you think, Sylvie?
Oh my gosh, every word. Couldn't, I mean, so perfectly said. I'm so happy that you're sharing and normalizing that this is not a normal time. This is not, I mean, just parents that have been able to go to work to have that time away for themselves, away from their and necessary time away so they can, you know, have a separate identity and just be able to self-soothe in their own ways. It's almost like all the containers are bleeding. You know, there's no sense of separateness, it sounds like, from what was work, what was for my time with my friends, maybe with the date night, or maybe even just having a night with my girls or with my guys. So it's such a restructuring of, or I should say a lack, there is no structure to anything. You know, it's like we're in the crisis phase.
We're in the crisis phase. And that first week when I panicked, and I remember that a lot of my clients were talking about that they were having more arguments and fights than normal with people that they usually never had conflicts with. And what I was explaining is that when there's fear in the world, when there's a lot of fear and anxiety in the world, and a lot of uncertainty, you know, who is driving you? The ego. And what happens when the ego is driving you? That you literally have, how do you call it? I always forget, like, I know it in Spanish, but you're kind of like in a defensive state, like somebody's gonna come and attack you. That's what you believe. Like you're aware, you're looking for the lion, you know?
Like hypervigilant, kind of?
Very hypervigilant and very vulnerable. And what happens is that even the nicest of comments that can feel like somebody's criticizing you can get you into a very, very defensive mode. And same with the kids. You know, instead of seeing your kids' reactions or your kids' normal, challenging ways of behaving, or normal way of behaving, it doesn't even have to be challenging. Maybe you see it as challenging. You see it as something that's personal. Like, why aren't they helping me? Like, why are they doing this to me? When it's not even to you, it doesn't have anything to do with you. But then when you take it so personally, you tend to react. And not just that, like I do believe, and I see it with my kids, that they can consume the energy in the environment. And if you're in a really bad state or in a very difficult state of being, they know it. Even if you're not talking, even if you're not arguing, like they consume that energy and they reflect that. And I notice that, like, every time I'm scared or I'm sad or I'm mad or whatever it is that's going on with me, I completely see it in my children. And it's since they were babies. So
it's amazing that they're so connected and dependent. I mean, they literally are dependent, but when, like, how you describe the emotion and how sensitive they are to their caregiver, and how much pressure that adds, right? Like, just to feel like you have to just hold it together even more, even though you're figuring things out yourself moment by moment right now. Excuse me.
Yes, completely. And I had a question. Somebody asked me today, what do I do if I yell at the kids? Like, if I already made the mistake of yelling at my kids. And my response would be, if you feel like you shouldn't have, and usually, you know, I really try to teach parents to not yell, that there's other forms of expressing yourself, and everything you do is a model for them. Like you're modeling behavior for them to then repeat. So if you're doing this type of things that you're not proud of, apologizing, you know, I think parents should also apologize if they make mistakes. And that's going to teach a lesson to your child. One, that you're human. Two, what is allowed and what is not allowed, what is an example behavior and what is a behavior that it's wrong, you know, because you're hurting another person. And I think it's so important to model that. And if you make a mistake and you are unable to regulate your emotions and you react, I think it's imperative that you acknowledge that and apologize and understand and make them understand that you're human and you also make mistakes and that you shouldn't have. You shouldn't have yelled, and that there were other ways to manage that situation. And you can even explain what were those other ways. I think that's a teaching lesson.
Because it's going to happen, right? We're going to likely act in ways that are not ourselves because we're dipped in so much stress right now. But like you said, we can use that, even if the kids are, you know, what would you say about kids that are really, really young? Like how early can parents start modeling that repair and that experience of apologizing?
Look, my babies are 2 years old, 2.5. And I did it the first time when they were 2. And if I would have made a mistake before, I would have. Like, I think since they're born, we should talk to them as if they're understanding, because I believe they are understanding. And I remember, and I'm going to talk about my experience, I was very tired. I didn't sleep the night before because they were sick. And I don't remember what happened that day, but there were a lot of vulnerability factors. And then I couldn't wait to get home, put the kids to sleep, and go and sleep because I really needed to sleep and lie down. And then I remember they wanted to play with me. You know, it was like 9 p.m. and I was trying to put them to sleep, and they were playing with me and like kind of like challenging me. And I was really trying my best to explain that it wasn't the time, that it was time to sleep. And then I exploded. And I exploded. And I remember they were crying like crazy. I put them to their cribs and I went to my room. And all I wanted to do was forget about that episode, go to sleep. I knew that they were going to stop crying at some point and go to sleep. And I just wanted to like forget it. Like this never happened, because also like I had that extra layer of shame that I am a therapist and I should know better. So it was like, this never happened. And I was able at that moment, I had to like really, really access consciousness. It was really hard because I was in a really emotional state at that moment. So I had to accept that what I did happened and I couldn't turn back time. I yelled at them like a crazy woman, and I had to turn shame into guilt. So instead of saying I'm a bad mother, like I'm not good enough as a mother, I had to say I am human and I just made a mistake. And that's when I was able to say, okay, now that I've accepted that I did what I did, now that I've turned shame into guilt, what are my options right now? I can do what my ego is telling me, which is forget that it happened and go to sleep and let them cry into sleep. Or maybe I can go there and apologize. And I remember I went into the room and I said, my baby's names are Vanessa and Jessica. And I said, Vanessa, Jessica, Vanessa. And they couldn't even look at me in the eye. And then I said, I'm sorry. And the moment I say I'm sorry, both of them look at me. And I asked them, can I hug you? Yes, I hugged them. I told them I shouldn't have yelled. Mom wasn't able to manage her emotions and she yelled, and that shouldn't have happened. I always explain to you guys to not yell, and I just did exactly what I said we shouldn't do. The next day, 8 a.m. in the morning, I accessed the camera because I have a camera in the room. And I see them both, they're twins, talking about the episode. but it
Wow.
was the cutest thing in the world. They were like, "Mommy yelled last night." Yes.
Oh,
And then she came and she apologized because we shouldn't yell at each other. No, we
wow.
shouldn't. They were having like a conversation about it.
My
And it
God.
was my husband was hearing it with me. And he was like, "What? You yelled?" And we were like laughing because he was just like, hearing what happened last night. And but it was amazing that I utilized a very vulnerable moment, and I took advantage of that to help them learn,
Mm.
and to help them, yeah, as a lesson, as an experience. How do you say it? Lesson experience? How do you say it?
Um, you
A
you
teaching experience. I don't know.
you use it as the teaching experience or a
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
So that's that's what I want to encourage you to do, because we're all going to make mistakes at this time, because we're all very stressed for different reasons. And it's very normal that you don't act in ways that you're mostly proud of. Yet it's also very important that if you're going to apologize, you make sure you try your best to not do it again.
Mm. I want to map out everything that you just said because you just dropped so many nuggets. And first of all, thank you
Teachable moment. Yeah,
for
teachable moment. There it is.
sharing that, Stephanie. I mean, it takes so much. It just takes so much humility and courage, and that's one of the things I just love about you. You know, you're so genuine. You're such a genuine heart. Like if I could just describe you, like a genuine heart. Like I could feel your kindness just radiating in everything that you're sharing, and my eyes just filled with tears when you share that, because I know what it takes to do to pull that, right? To pull that self-awareness, to turn. You know, you said so many beautiful things. You touched on the importance of, first of all, monitoring our own expectations on ourselves, and monitoring when that shame voice starts to come in, because it's going to come up for all of us, but especially when you're managing the life of your child on top of your own and your family's experience. So monitoring your shame, giving yourself permission to make mistakes, and the ability to recognize shame for what it is, and then to find a way to turn it into guilt. And I think that's a really important distinction that often we're not taught, right? And we've talked about this. We talked about this in our when you brought me on the Life for the Shame episode. How do you do that? Like for parents that are listening right now, they're like, how the hell did you turn your shame into guilt? Because I don't know how to stop feeling bad about my own experience and not make it about, or just go down that spiral. Like, are there certain mantras that you say to yourself? You know what I mean?
So after watching a lot of videos of Brené Brown and reading a lot of her books, I kind of understood that shame is a human experience and everybody has it.
Mm.
So and it drives a lot of our behaviors. So I started at first, and I think I told you this, that when I heard about shame, for me it was very foreign. Like when I was growing up, like nobody talked about shame. Nobody talked about shame. It's not a topic that we usually talk about.
Yes.
And so I didn't understand what it meant, and I didn't understand how it reflected in me. So I was very unaware of the role that shame played in my life. And that's when I started being curious. Like, okay, so Brené Brown is saying all of this. I kind of resonate with all of her messages, and they seem very interesting and powerful. So let me start questioning myself. When is the shame come up for me, and how does it come up? So yeah, so every time I kind of get defensive or mad, or I have this urge to yell or hide or leave or whatever it is that's going on with me, that I know I'm not proud of. I know it's not the example that I would want to give a client or my family or anyone. I try to access shame. Like I have to pause and think, what about this experience is shame?
Mm.
And how? and what are the messages? Like, I want to access it so badly because I am just so curious about that, the role of shame in our lives in general.
So you're saying to
So
go into it, like you're starting to notice maybe you're getting defensive, or you want to yell, or maybe, like you said, hide. And those are kind of like your cues that shame might be coming up. Is that what I'm kind of getting, Stephanie?
because what happens is that it's very easy to create a story of why we did what we did.
I see.
And that story is always going to be outside. It's very easy to do that. You know, I yelled at you because you did this. You know, I am, I don't know, whatever it is that's going on for you. Like, it's very easy to look for fault. Like, it's very, very easy, you know? And there's no growth when we're always looking outside of who's at fault. There's no growth. So I want to take responsibility for my parts, and the only way to do that is to look inside. And I know, again, because I was very informed by Brené Brown's content on how shame plays a part in everyone's life. So I asked myself, what about this is shame? And where can I find shame within myself in this certain situation? So with the experience that I just told you, I felt a lot of shame for yelling at my children, for that on top of yelling at my children, I'm a therapist and I should know better. And a lot of other things that I was kind of like judging myself and for whatever it was that I did at certain points in my life. So
it's a lot
when,
of, you know, that you have to, the awareness, again, as always with everything, it's like it's not something we're conscious of. We might have these reactions to things, but until we really go head on and look at it and name it and look at the stories that are attached to it, we don't know. Like, we're just living it unconsciously. And what I'm really getting from what you're sharing and what you were able to do is that you spent that time and you had enough experience exploring those shame stories, which then allowed you to move it to guilt. Is that correct, would you say?
yeah, definitely it's correct. And again, it's also that feeling of not being proud of what I did. So not being proud of what I did is, what can I do right now to make myself proud again?
Beautiful
So I'm not,
distinction. Yes, to kind of counter that shame experience, right? Instead of like what we want to do when we're feeling shame, hide, like you said, make it about the other person. My partner did this to me, or my kid made me yell, or it's like all these things and we can find stories there. We can totally find all stories.
All of it.
But what you said so perfectly is that there's no growth there. You know, it doesn't, you feel there's always something a little bit off when you don't really take that responsibility, you know? Exactly.
And I think the action question is really important. Like, what can I do right now? Understanding that I'm human. What can I do right now to make my reality a better reality? And for me, that better reality was utilizing this experience as a learning experience for me and for them as well. So yeah, this experience that I just talked about is one experience out of many that can happen specifically in this time of coronavirus. So being able to access shame and accept different types of situations that we don't like, and find that self-compassion and compassion for others in these times of a lot of stress and anxiety, I think that's what's gonna help you change the nature of your relationships with others and with yourself as well.
So beautiful, Stephanie. I mean, I think this just models, it's kind of like the anecdote to, I think for me, being able to access apology and repair has been my biggest saving grace in relationships in general, because stuff is going to happen. Either you're going to walk away from the relationship. Obviously, you're not going to walk away from your babies, you know. They're like, we're holding you accountable, right? You can't leave me in this crib forever. You have to come and, you know. But it's that anecdote, and I think a lot of times when we don't know how to do it, it's like we don't know that this is a possibility, or that people are going to admire us. Our children are going to admire us so much more when we show them that we're human, that, you know, yes, we're going to feel stress and we're going to, you know, do things and make mistakes, but that it's just the most, it's like creating that the richest lemon out of this, you know, the lemon juice out of all these lemons. This is the word. I'm terrible at analogies and metaphors, but I think you get what
Don't
I'm saying.
worry.
You know,
I get
squeezing the
perfectly.
lemon juice out of all of this, you know?
And I was saying that when we yell, when we ground, when we, like, literally what I wanted to do that day was leave them in the crib crying. I knew they were gonna go to sleep at some point, and then the next day was gonna be new. They're 2 years old, they're gonna forget. That's what we think, right?
Yeah.
That's the story that we want to believe. And I think it's really important to understand that every time we do these kinds of things, even if they don't remember, their unconscious remember,
Mm.
and they start sensing danger.
Mm.
And so even if they start behaving the way you want them to behave,
Mm.
it doesn't mean that your efforts on educating are being successful. Now, your efforts on not being uncomfortable and having them behave the way you want them to behave for you to be comfortable
Mm.
are going to be successful. But they're not going to be successful in the way that you're going to raise self-fulfilling, autonomous, and secure and self-confident human beings. That's not going to be successful at all. Specifically, if they're being yelled at and being told that they're, I don't know, bad children, as I hear sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, all of this are only, yes, definitely they're going to behave. You know, that goal of yours, probably you're going to attain it if you're continuing to hurt as a consequence your children. So yes, you're going to have children that are going to be very, how do you say it? Very,
like obedient,
what?
like obedient.
Very obedient, but as they grow, they're going to grow with the messages that something's wrong with them. Because every time they try to be themselves, which again, every children wants to play and wants to stay past midnight and wants to challenge you and run around the house and come and get me. You know, that's what children do. So when you don't let them be, then they have this message that somehow being themselves is not okay.
Mm.
And you don't want that. I don't think any parent wants that.
Absolutely. Like you said, you can get children to conform, but then you will lose their respect and you will lose their ability to really, you know, it's like managing the conflict and the differences and what comes up for our children. It's our children. I don't have children, but children, you know, and even developmentally, the different ages, it's different. It's just so different. I would love if you can actually share a little bit about, I know we spoke about emotional regulation and what that might look like right now. You said, like, you know, our children maybe having tantrums or not acting the way that we want them to act, right? Because of everything going on. So how can we accept their responses while also applying, you know, discipline with that, but knowing that this is a moment of potentially offering some kind of emotional regulation and comfort for our children, even though we might be so triggered, right? So there's just so much without putting that expectation that we're going to do this perfectly. So I think we have to keep saying that, right? The umbrella with every live. No pressure to do this perfectly. You're gonna mess up. There's no, like, we have to, like, keep that message in the forefront because we're navigating such turbulent and unique, not normal waters. But it's also important that we have access to these things, right? Otherwise, it's just gonna be the wild, wild west. So
yeah, crisis outside, crisis inside. It's triple crisis. You don't want that.
yes.
So I always explain, and I actually wrote a post a while ago about it, how we end up reacting to a situation. So the first thing that happens is that there's vulnerabilities. So what are vulnerabilities? Vulnerabilities is if you didn't sleep well last night, that's a vulnerability. And if you're having a very hard financial situation, that's a vulnerability. If you're not getting along with your partner, or if you feel very alone, that's a vulnerability. If you haven't eaten the whole day and you're very hungry, and anything that makes you feel more prone to react against a trigger because you already had too much,
Yes.
So that's the first thing that happens, vulnerability start building up. And then there's the trigger, what is that thing that sets you off? We call it in Spanish the drop that makes the glass fall. I think so. Yeah.
It's like having a cup filled with water and adding one more drop.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So that's the trigger. That's kind of like, or not even. Let's call it the event that sets you off. And then is the sensations. The first thing you feel when something sets you off is sensations. If it's the jaw tightening, or if that you feel hotness in your body, or you start doing like this with your hands, the sensations that you feel in your body. And then is the interpretation. I think before the sensations, it's the interpretation that you give to the situation that happens that sets you off. So that's what the only thing of everything that you're able to control and to manage is the interpretation. So what happens with kids is that when they have a tantrum,
was for an adult, right? This was how an adult processes when the vulnerabilities start to get too big, or then there's a trigger. They're then able to interpret the situation, and then they start to feel the sensations.
The sensations, the emotion, what you want to do, the urges. Then you act on the urge, and then it's like the after effect of that you acted on the urge. And it's a whole cycle, because then that becomes a vulnerability. But the only thing that you can control in everything that I mentioned is, definitely vulnerabilities. You can reduce them, like for example, sleeping and eating. There's a lot of vulnerabilities that you can eliminate because you're taking care of yourself. But the other thing is the interpretation. So every situation, every reality, every fact that happens, each one of us, each human gives a different interpretation of it. And so, for example, it happens to me and I've catched myself because I'm aware, because I've worked a lot in my level of awareness. But sometimes I don't catch myself and I just react again because I'm human. But mostly I try, and I've catched myself if one of my daughters is, in the middle of a tantrum and challenging me, and no, I don't want to eat, or no, I don't want to sleep, or no, I don't want to, whatever it is, we make it all about us, like she is challenging me instead of she's having a challenging time or she's going through something. No, we make it about me, about us, all the time. Mostly, I don't want to talk in absolutes, but mostly we all make it about us. And that's the interpretation, their reality, which is maybe she's tired and she wants to go to sleep, and that's why she doesn't want to eat, or whatever it is we want them to do, because we love to have control over our children. And even if it doesn't serve any purpose, we love that when we say do this, they do it.
I can imagine.
So it's very important to access, again, the interpretation that you're giving to their behaviors, because most likely it has nothing to do about you, and it has to do about them. Like, I'm sure that that day that I ended up yelling at them because they didn't want to go to sleep, I'm sure that what they wanted was to spend more time with mommy because I spent the whole day at work, probably, or anything else. But it wasn't about me. And what we do is that in our minds we make it all about us. And if it's like if it's on purpose, like if they're trying to set us off, like if they want us to yell at them, and it's not like that at all. So that's what we're able to control, the interpretation. And in order to change the interpretation, we need to access the interpretation. And in order to access, we need to tap more into awareness and consciousness.
I mean, even just what you just broke down, the layers between going from, first of all, the fact that so many people are in that more vulnerable state right now. So that window probably feels so much shorter, right? Like it's like whoop, loop, like right there. And even the thought of creating space in between to process and to think about it, it's going to take much more consciousness, like you said, much more self-awareness, even if that's, I need to go lock myself in the bathroom for a few minutes, right? Whatever I can do, and just think to myself, how am I personalizing this? How am I making this about me? And one of the things I love to do when it comes, I can personalize a lot. That's kind of my ways of cognitive distortions. Really challenging those and really, am I sure that this is true? Am I 100% sure that this is what is happening right now? Especially with a child, right? I mean, I think that's probably such a much more unique way to do that, because, I mean, how can we can't just ask our children, was that what you were doing? We don't have that kind of back and forth. So it adds that layer where we're having to really do this on our own. Obviously, we can work with a therapist or work with someone to help us, or even just another parent. Like, have you ever experienced this feeling of personalizing your children's behavior in the moment and having some kind of shame-busting conversation? But how can we make more space for that during this crazy time, right? Like, how have you perhaps done that, or with parents that are just, their kids are literally living on top of their heads right now while they're on the laptop? It's just so hard.
It is really hard. It's really hard.
Parents.
So these are the two things that I'm doing. I'm creating moments for me to meditate. I try to do it at night. A lot of people ask me, what's the best hour to meditate? I think it depends on the person. Like, for me, it's at night. And you can do it many times a day. Like, the more the better, actually. It's like a muscle.
That's so helpful.
And the other thing that I do is that, and this, I got taught this by an amazing therapist, and she actually has an Instagram right now. I'm gonna send it to you because she's really, really good at conscious parenting. Her name is Evelyn. And she tells, I went to a workshop of her, and she asks parents to, like, literally sit on the floor with their children and enter their stories, enter their play, like literally be a child again with them. And that's the way you're going to connect with them. And that's the way you're going to understand how they're processing information. If you're always the parent, the authority, then it's very difficult to connect with them. And we were children once, like, we can still access that. And it's really incredible. I do it all the time. Since I went to that workshop, I sit on the floor and I enter the stories and I ask them out, what are we playing? Who is this and who is that? And what relationship do they have? Like, I try to be very curious about how are they playing? What part do I have in this play? Or what part do they want me to have? And so she actually did a post, and I have it here because I think this is going to be very helpful. And she says, parenting during coronavirus, more hugs. So definitely start hugging more cuddles, more pretending, and more creating. Like, start tapping into your creativity, which again, it can be really hard
Yeah.
when we're very stressed and there's a lot of fear, but at least try a little bit, baby steps, or help them. I mean, ask them to create for you.
Mm,
Okay,
mm,
that can be very helpful. And more nature walks if you can. Here in Miami, we can. And just nature walks. Don't go near anybody.
yeah. Social distancing still is happening. Yes.
More sibling play. Like, for example, my twins are getting along better than ever right now because they're together all day and they're playing with each other. And more family meals. Try to start incorporating them into meal prep or ask their help, literally. Like, I sometimes give them a wipey and I'm like, okay, right now we're going to clean the floor. And
Oh,
I see them, they're so happy that I asked for help. So happy. They love being asked for help.
I mean, just being with you and doing things with you, I'm sure just is like, they don't care what it is. I mean, of course, obviously there's things they would maybe don't want to do, but they want to just, and just having that extra time at home with parents that a lot of kids haven't been able to have. I imagine that in itself has been um, the positive side of all of this, right?
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely, yes. They were longing that time with you, and now they have you, so we have to be able to do our best effort to connect with them at this time.
Who
More
is
cooking,
Stephanie? Can I want someone to put the person's name in the comment box? What's her Instagram name? Evelyn's?
Hatch and Bloom
Hatch and Bloom.
Co. Company.
Can somebody put that in the comment box at Hatch and Bloom Co? It's just a
She's amazing,
resource for.
really, really amazing, and she does a lot of workshops all about parenting, and she follows and reads all the books of Dr. Shefali
Mm.
Savadi. So she's amazing. I actually did a workshop with her, and that's when I fell in love with her content and way of explaining things. So there it is.
Thank you so much, you guys. I appreciate you guys writing it. Thank you. Was there anything else that you wanted to read? I didn't mean to cut you off from reading it.
No, it's okay. More movie nights,
Movie.
definitely. More observing, more laughter, more coloring, and more freedom, more tantrums. She writes here, more comforting. Like, that's the moment to start like connecting with them and helping them regulate their own emotions. And more messes, more cleanups, more repairs. So start welcoming all of it, of what it is to be a parent, the good parts and the not so good parts as well. And that's what's going to help you relax when you start opening the door to everything that comes with it.
And there's just such a wide range of that right now, right? And it's, if we're going to make space for the challenges, it's also important that we make space for some of the gifts that we get to experience with young children. I mean, I wish I had, even though if I had nieces and nephews right now, I wouldn't be with them because I would be social distancing from them too. So, but it's just, there's just, kids are just such special, special beings. Do you
I love
have,
it.
I know you have, you just launched the workshop. Do you have anything for parenting, or are you offering sessions, Stephanie, for parents that are maybe co-parenting, or maybe just want to, just to talk about their personal experience with this and get some support? Can you share about what are some of your offerings are right now? We have
So
about
I
5
have,
minutes before Instagram kicks me off.
okay. So I have, yes, I have a workshop that is called More Peace of Mind. I've done it many, many times. Every month I host one. This is the first time that I'm doing it online. So I have one in Spanish that I started yesterday, and I'm starting another one next week in English. So the first day we talk all about mindfulness and radical acceptance. The second day I talk about emotions, because I believe that when I know that every emotion holds a message, and I want for people to start having that opportunity to identify emotions and hearing their emotions and understand that emotions are not bad, but they're just there to bring us information. So start paying attention to them. The third day is about assertiveness. So I talk about all the ways we usually communicate and how do we start being more assertive instead of aggressive or passive aggressive. And I give the tools. And then the last day, I talk about boundaries.
Mm.
And
Our
yes,
favorite topic, our
our
love, our
favorite
joint
topic.
love affair.
Yes. So every time I do it, there's a big chunk of people that come that are parents, and they ask me a lot of questions regarding parenting using those tools. And I focus a lot on that in those sessions. And I definitely do co-parenting and parenting sessions in my practice.
Is it
And
only in Florida, Stephanie, that people can work with you one-on-one? Or
yes, it's
okay,
here in Miami.
in
It's here in
Miami.
Miami.
Got it.
And yeah, and if you want more specialized in parenting, I would definitely recommend Hatch and Bloom Co. Like she has helped me a lot as a friend and somebody that I admire. And if not, then definitely I'm here. And thank you so much for bringing me. I love
Definitely.
talking to you,
Me
Sylvie.
too. Thank you so much for
For
being
Mark, for my community that are here hearing me,
Oh,
Sylvie is like my inspiration.
oh.
So please, like, go to her profile and consume all the wisdom that she has because she's gonna change a lot of the ways you view the world.
Thank you, Stephanie. You're so sweet. Thank you for being here. Also, definitely check out Stephanie's page. And for the workshop, Stephanie, is the link for that in your bio?
Write me a DM. If
Okay,
you're interested, write me a private message and I'll send you the link.
perfect. And we'll be saving this live. I'll definitely be sharing it on my YouTube. Give me a bit, definitely give me a little bit, but I'll announce it here and I'll let Stephanie know when it's up to share it with all of you guys to have.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Love you, Stephanie. Thank you.
Have a
Bye,
great rest of the
everybody.
day.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Stephanie.